Welcome to Just a Cup on Believe. I am Coach Bryan Fetzer. This is an organic conversation with some of the world's greatest athletes and the individuals that helped get them to that point in their life. And today is nothing different than what we've had in the past. An incredible guest. We are going to dive into the world of prep basketball. And I have with me today, I have the co-founder and the director of operations of Prolific Prep based in Northern California. That is Philippe Doherty. And man, I am excited to have you on and get to talk about prep basketball because it's in the news constantly. I mean, you name it, people are talking about it. So it's excited to kind of dive in and kind of chat a little bit about what Prolific Prep's doing, because Prolific Prep is literally at the forefront of it with the number of guys who had an MBA and so forth. So without further ado, how in the world did Prolific Prep come about in the beginning?
Coach Bryan, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. It's about as organic as you could potentially think. Our current president and co-founder, Jeremy Rosati, he's one of the best skill development guys in the world. And after I coached college basketball at the University of San Francisco for about 5 years, Jeremy and I went around the country and the world, and we would just train players, and then we would train coaches. It was somewhat easy to deal with countries overseas because you dealt with federations, right? And you dealt with one person in charge for the entire country for that sport. So we would go to multiple countries and we would train coaches on how to train players. Now, mind you, Jeremy, is about as good as it gets. And he just did it, as a hobby. And he ended up, inventing patents for basketball because he was just very smart and loved training and was really, really good at his craft. And I learned a ton from him. And in the summer of 2013, USA Basketball sent a freshman from Detroit and his mother out to train with Jeremy and I. And at the time we were helping a buddy of ours coach an AAU program. So we had a training camp in Northern California for about 8 days. And Josh Jackson joined our training camp as a 9th grader. And we would train. We had 3 sessions. We loved being in the gym. And we were in a small gym in Dixon, California, which is a farm town, where a buddy of ours was, coaching AAU, and we were helping him out. And we had a really, really good team. And it was a team that we created in 2 months. So a good friend of mine, George Souza, is like, "Hey, Philippe, I've never really coached good players before." And I'm like, "Okay, what's up?" He's like, "I have my last hurrah here. We just created a little AAU program. Can you and Jeremy go out and recruit some guys so I can have a good spring and summer?" And I was like, "Well, it's February. Most of these kids are on these teams or whatever. And I just got done coaching AAU for 8 years, and previously I coached in Division I. So I said, I'll try. And so in 2 months, I did home visits, and we had about 9 or 10 kids. One of the kids that we recruited actually was a lottery pick, Marquise Chris, who was playing JV basketball at the time, literally in a gym in Elk Grove, California. And we saw him run and do layups. And he was in junior varsity, right? He was a sophomore, not even playing varsity. And I turned to his mother, who I just met, Shantae, and I was like, "Hey, Shantae, I know it sounds really weird. In about 5 years, he'll probably play in the NBA." And she's like, "He can't even make layups. I was like, "The way he runs and jumps is a little bit different." So we had 9 or 10 kids in a gym in the middle of nowhere in Northern California. We were training. We loved training. Jeremy was fantastic. USA Basketball, Don Showalter called and said, "Hey, a young kid just wants to experience you guys' training. He's from Detroit. He needs something different." Mom came out. She spent 7 days with us. We didn't know at the time she had a plan. We didn't know this. And so she's retired military. Her name is Shanita Jones. She goes by Apples. Her and her twin sister is called Peaches. So the grandma, when she came out, they're like, "Your head looks like an apple and your head looks like a peach." So she's known as Apples. And a lot of people don't know her name. And that's Josh Jackson's mother. Her name is Shanita Jones, but her name's known as Apples. And so Apples was with us for 7 days with her son, Josh. And during the middle of the day, she would be gone. And we didn't know we didn't know if she was touring Northern California. And sometimes people are in the stands, watch us train, because Jeremy's fantastic. And so what happened was, during those 7 days, Shanita Jones, also known as Apples, had a plan in regards to, after her son's sophomore year, which was going to be the following school year, she wanted to take him out of Detroit to experience new things, be around new people, and potentially be in an environment that would be stimulating, right? A lot of state associations have restrictions. So there's good and bad about, the United States. the United States is the only country in the world where school and sports are intertwined. Everywhere around the world, school and sports are separated. So there's good and bad to it. For basketball, there's a lot of restrictions. You have 50 states, and 33 of them don't even play with a shot clock, right? So here we are playing a sport of basketball. It's 2024. Bryan, coach, you and I jumped we jumped to France right now. We go watch a 12 and under game. It's a 24-second shot clock, right? And then we take a small plane to Greece and we go watch a 14-year-old game. It's a 24-second shot clock. And then we go to Spain and watch a training segment, and everything's 24-second shot clock. But yet here in the United States, you have varsity basketball in multiple states, more than 30 that don't have shot clock, which limits development and limits stimulation and reps and mental reps for coaches and all these things. So, one of the things Apples want to do for Josh was one to get stimulated in a different environment. He won the lottery in terms of genetics and an extremely gifted athlete and whatnot, and was on his way to being solid and very good. And so we were training Josh for 7 days, and Apples was driving around Northern California looking at schools. And we had no idea. Jeremy lives like an hour and a half from me, right? And so every weekend we get in the gym and train. And so at the end of the 7 days, he's like, hey, guys, this is what we're going to do. And I said, we just met Apples, right? And she's fantastic. Great woman, retired U.S. Navy, just works her butt off, mentor, just all the different hats a single mom in the United States wears for their kids. And she's like, this is what we're going to do. Next summer, when we get back from Greece, we're going to play in the World Championships with USA Basketball. I'm flying here to Northern California, and I'm going to drop my son off with you guys. And I'm like, okay, great. What, he's going to stay for a couple of days? You want to train again? No problem. We'll train him for 3 or 4 days and get him back to Detroit. She's like, no. I'm going to give him to you, and you guys got to figure out what you're going to do. And I was like, Apples, we just met you. Walk me through what you're thinking about. And she's like, look, this is what I would like. I want my son in your guys' hands for his last 2 years of high school. And I want you guys to mentor him. I want you to develop him. I want you to have him experience new things. I said, okay, well, what do you where do you want to go to school? What's the situation? She's like, don't worry about it. I've already figured out where he's going to school. And it's a private school in Napa. And I said, Napa? Oh, wow. I grew up in San Francisco. I'd never been in the city of Napa in my entire life. And it's only 38 minutes north of San Francisco. Never been. I grew up with 3 brothers in San Francisco, and it was school sports our whole life. And Napa was beautiful, right? It was wine and all
Wine
these
country.
Yeah, wine country, right? Basketball? What are we talking about? And there was a private school there with dorms. And she's like, I've already located it. And so I went there, and it was a Christian Brother high school, which is called Justin Siena. And I had gone to a Christian Brother high school in San Francisco. So I walked in and I looked to the right. I'm like, Brother Kevin. He's a liturgy director. He was my liturgy director in high school. I'm like, Brother Kevin, what are you doing here? He's like, Philippe, what's going on? I haven't seen you in 20 years. He's like, I work at Justin Siena. Then I looked down the hall. There was like 4 people that I knew, because there's 4 Christian Brother high schools in the Bay Area. So that's how organic it happened. And so what we did, Jeremy and I, which is really surreal, for 12 months, we prepared to create a basketball academy inside a private school. So we did not want to have restrictions, right? And so we wanted to have the ability to train our kids whenever we want, for however long we want, and the kids that we want from around the world or whatever. And so basically we created an advanced placement PE class. You and I go to school, Bryan. You're probably an AP chemistry and AP biology because you're an elite science student. And I'm really good in history and arts, and probably I'll take AP US history and AP government. And so those are classes where the kids that are accelerate in those curriculums, that those classes can get extra stimulation. So we just said, hey, we're going to do an advanced placement PE class, right? Where our kids after school, have specific teachers. Bryan, if you're an elite soccer player, an elite baseball player, and you go to high school, hopefully your high school coach is good. Maybe it's the history teacher, maybe it's the biology teacher. We don't know. A lot of times in high school, the teacher has to be a coach, and so you have restrictions and all these things. So, anyways, we created an AP basketball class, which is like basically a basketball academy in a private school. And the state association in California is fantastic. The CIF, the California Interscholastic Federation. My high school baseball coach actually is the director, Ron Acchetti. And we were like, hey, we don't want to play in the CIF because there's restrictions, on who we can play and when we can play and when we can train. But we're going to create a basketball academy. We're going to be scholastic, which means all the kids go to the same school. And from there, we're going to just try to do basically build a basketball curriculum to prepare our guys for whatever they think their next step is in basketball. And so that was 11 years ago. And our first team, we had kids from different parts of the world, and we just kind of put it together. And there was 2 of us. And 11 years later, we've had 8 guys in the NBA. We've had 12 McDonald's All-Americans. We've had 15 players in Nike Hoop Summit. I've had 10 coaches go on to coach in college. We've had 44 kids graduate from college for the first time in their family. And we've had kids from 27 countries. And so it's a unique thought in the sense that they go to school at a private school, which is Napa Christian in Napa. We've been there 8 years and fantastic. And our PE class starts at 4:45. It's our advanced placement PE class, and it's basketball. And we do that for 3 or 4 hours. And it's basically, we have no restriction. And since 10 years ago, there's probably been 50, 70 other programs that have popped up around the country in different fashions, right? Whatever. But that's in a nutshell, which was very long.
No,
how it started.
It's fascinating because I was just ready to ask you, like, how many other programs are as unique as what you've done? And prior to that 11 years, were there any, or were there just,
So the premise back in the day was preparatory. And preparatory meant 5th year, preparing for college. And most preparatory institutions were on the East Coast. And they were on the East Coast because they had dorms and they had facilities, and they would do a full year of academic, right? And so for 40, 50, 60 years, you had all these schools in the New England Prep School Athletic Conference where they had kids both in high school and 5th year preparatory. But the word prep over the last 15 years has changed because it means different things to different people. Prep currently means, in our basketball landscape, national high school basketball. And national high school basketball can mean a lot of different things. However, the couple things people have to be aware of is the word scholastic means all the kids have to attend the same school in order for them to be considered scholastic. And scholastic is really important for the colleges, for college coaches to come and watch and be able to play in certain events. But a lot of different state associations, they're all different in the rules. Like we just talked about, why would Josh Jackson leave Michigan? Well, they had no shot clock. They also had a rule that limited them to travel 170 miles outside of their campus. They can't travel further. If there was
Ohio has the LeBron James rule.
Yeah, all these different factors, right? No shot clock, all these different things. And so anyways, over the last 15 years, different basketball academies have popped up, and there's a whole bunch of variety of how do they get their schooling, right? We wanted to integrate European thinking with American traditional high school. We wanted to be in a traditional high school with other students. For us, we had to be at a private school because we have international students. So international students receive an I-20 in order to go to the U.S. Embassy to be able to get in the country. So we basically kind of integrated European and world thought of how to train players at a private school. And currently, to answer your question, around the country, there are a whole bunch of different setups. You might find 12 guys in the middle of a trailer taking online classes in the middle of Oklahoma or in the middle of Arizona. Right. You might have guys that, at some kids that are international go to a private school, and others have an online program because the NCAA has 2 or 3 accredited online programs, Florida Virtual School and all these other ones. And so it's exploded partly because basketball, you don't need that many people, right? It's not a large number of people that you have to be able to assimilate for a game. Football is very challenging. IMG is one of the only kind of prep football programs. However, for football, it's very challenging for them because most of the states have now said that we're no longer going to play programs like an IMG for football, and it makes it challenging for them to find games. For basketball, it's gone the other way. There's too many, and there's programs that pop up one day and close the next day, and there's all these different things. But to answer your question, probably, Montverde in the mid 2000s, late 2000s started, the kind of the thought process of beautiful private school. Let's have, in addition to our regular sports programs, let's have an advanced basketball program where we can start attracting players from around the world, and then still be kind of associated with the state association, and be able to play in the state and kind of be able to play out of the state. Because the state of Florida, if you're in the state association, there are some restrictions, but the state of Florida also allows sub-association membership, where a lot of states it's either you're in or you're out, right? Like for California, we're recognized by the CIF, but we're not. You're either a member or you're not a member, and we're not a member. And so because we choose to play a national schedule. So the unfortunate part in this industry, there's probably a lack of information. Right. And part of the lack of information is not understanding certain words. Like when someone says prep, I always preface it to them. Are you talking about 5th year prep, postgraduate work? Or are you talking about prep as in national basketball, which most people are using it as lingo? Prep means national high school basketball.
You are listening to Just a Cup on Believe. We are diving deep into the world of prep basketball and talking prolific prep specifically based out of California currently. And they are, the trendsetters with as many NBA prospects and major college players. And, I've got to ask you this too. Do all of the players on the team end up playing at the major college or the professional ranks, or is there a couple guys or some guys maybe D2 or D3 or to that kind of facet?
Yeah, very good question. We have kids from all over the world at all different levels. We've had kids that are D3 All-Americans, D2 NAIA. We've had kids at all levels of Division I. And our roster usually every year is, first of all, it's probably half American and half international. And then the second part of that is, the stars, the Gary Trent Juniors, the Josh Jacksons, the Jalen Greens, the headliner names over the years, everyone assumes every guy's a superstar, 5-star, or whatever. That's not how it is. We have very good players, but 9 superstars doesn't work on a team, right? It doesn't even work in the NBA. It doesn't work in the NBA. It doesn't work on an AU team. So it's kind of a mix, right? We need to find a mix of guys that, first of all, we don't want to have all seniors, right? Then you have to reload every year. But in this day and age, you have kids are moving high schools and colleges just because it's the trend across the United States based on NCAA rules, and it's kind of trickled down to high school. But no, we have a mixture of kids. Last year we had kids we had 2 or 3 kids go to Division III, Division II, NAIA. We had 7 or 8 go Division I. It all depends what the individual kind of, what their goals are, and then how they're going to reach those goals. For us, it's peer stimulation. The peer stimulation is every single day, a person to your right or left, may not be from the country you're from, is wanting to go to college and wanting to get better at the sport of basketball. And there's no better form of development than actual peer stimulation, where you're in the classroom with them. Our international students, and some guys are highly, highly competitive academically. We have a kid at Brown University, and Yves Missy, who was a first-round pick of the New Orleans Pelicans. He's an AP calculus class. His brother played at Harvard, and it's very. So we have guys that have competition in the classroom and then in the weight room and on the court, and the stimulation allows them to develop, and develop it is what they're seeking. But they're all at different stages of their development, right? We have a kid playing for the Atlanta Hawks currently right now, Mohamed Gay, who's currently the only player from the country of Senegal in the entire NBA. And he was drafted 2 years ago by the Atlanta Hawks. He came to us as a skinny, raw kid from Senegal right before COVID. And, we saw the potential in him. But if it wasn't for his teammates around him to push him every day, the Namari Burnett's, the Jalen Greens, the Coleman Hawkins, the Mawat Mags, all these players that were a little bit older. And if it wasn't for, we've had 69 host families. So the other kind of thing where we believe in development is the development of the person. So we thought about 11 years ago that primarily for international students, if we had an international student come to the United States, instead of putting him in a house where either he's speaking the same language, French, as other guys, and we actually find a host family where he has to learn how to survive, communicate, live in a whole new world, and have love and stimulation every day. And 7 of our 8 NBA players were hosted by families in Napa, including American players. Gary Trent Jr. had a host family. Josh Jackson had a host family. Mohamed Gay, Adem Bona. The list goes on. Eve Missy, and so
where do you find the host families? I mean, that's
Hey, Brian, it's a very good question. Our first host family came from a church, Grace Church, who's their pastor, fantastic, John Fernandez. And he got in front of a pulpit with me and we said, hey, look, congregation, we have this new basketball program coming to Napa. They're going to have kids from around the world. They have no housing. We need all of you to find people to host these kids from all over the world. It was as organic as that. And our first host family was his son, Pastor John Fernandez's son, which is Aaron Fernandez and his wife, Amy. And they hosted a young man from Mali named Amadou Sow, who's the second player in the history of our program behind Josh. And Amadou spent 4 years with us, graduated, went to UC Santa Barbara, played 4 years there, broke all kinds of records, graduated with a 3.7 degree, 3.7 GPA degree, fantastic. Second, I think number one all-time leading rebounder, second all-time in points scored, elite student, fantastic kid. He won the Big West Sports Academic Award amongst all male student athletes. Incredible human being. The Fernandez family just basically helped raise him from the age of 14.
Wow.
Every summer, he can't go home, so he's with the Fernandez family. He's now a professional player overseas, and every summer he's in Napa with his host family. It's very organic. And so we have actually an American, Jonathan Williams, who plays for the Houston Rockets. He's from New York. And so he graduated our high school in 2018. And every single summer he spends 2 months back at Napa training, and he sleeps in the bed at his host family with basically a small little bed with his host brother. And it was really organic. So how do we find host families? It's word of mouth. It's Grace Church. It's our school. It's people in the community that have opened their doors. And we've had 68 in 10 years, which is quite unique.
You hear you talking about it. I mean, I think the perception, the sad perception is when the whole Bishop Sycamore kind of fiasco happened in football in Ohio, where they had the made up school and that whole documentary is wild, to say the least. But I think a lot of people's first thought process when you say, oh, prep academy or something, that's the first thing they think of, way different than what you just explained, because what you just explained is a school. I mean, it's a school, relationship, community, all those kind of things, where unfortunately perceptions come from other parts because of, you have people that are doing things for the wrong reasons.
And that's normal. And basketball is a very fast paced and a lot of different things going on. You have players with representation and all that. So I would say the first couple years, we're the new kids on the block, and our competitors, probably would find different ways to recruit against us, et cetera. And that's normal. That's life. Yeah. But now going to year 11, you have to have some credibility in regards to programs, right? And we've been very full. We have the third most McDonald's All-Americans in the history of high school basketball. So the McDonald's All-American game has been since 1978. In a very short amount of time, 10 years, we have the third most at 12, right? And Montverde's at second at 17, and Oak Hill Academy's at 1 with 34, and they were the dominant prep program in the 80s and 90s. And that model was, go to a boarding school in the middle of Virginia and just train and get better. And Steve Smith is, if not the greatest high school coach, one of the greatest coaches regard levels of all sports. And he was fantastic. And he had a program for 40 years where, his main thing was development of the player and get these kids from around the country in a completely different environment so they can acquiesce and learn. And there's not really good cell phone reception there. So they had to train. They had to go to class, mouth of, Oak Hill there, mouth of Wilson, Virginia. And so, but yeah, I think now going on year 11, I would say that the trend is, what have you done, right? Who have you produced? What are they doing now? Who are your alumni? Are they graduating from college? Are they prepared, right? And so we really focus on the young men in our program who really literally come from around the world. We've had 27 countries represented. Our last 3 NBA draft picks are African big men. So this past year, Adem Bona from Nigeria was the 41st pick overall by the Philadelphia 76ers. Fantastic young man. His life story is fantastic. Was UCLA, great human being. Yves Missy from Cameroon. He was born in Belgium. His parents are incredible people. His brother Steve played at Harvard in the mid 2000s. Yves went and played at Baylor for 1 year, and he came to us and he was just developing and raw, and he just got better and better. And the environment was his host family, the Obertine family, was fantastic. They welcomed him with open arms. 14 months after leaving our program, he's just getting drafted. And so he's from Cameroon. And in the previous year, Mohamed Gay from Senegal, who also had a host family, the Bob and Heather Nations, was drafted. They were drafted by the Atlanta Hawks. And so our last three draft picks have been international players. And so the world of basketball is, diverse, unique. The last 5 NBA MVPs are international players.
Right.
And so the game of basketball is played all around the world. It's not an expensive sport to play, like football and some of these other sports. Right. You need pads, you need helmets. So I would say soccer, at its core, the easiest. Mm-hmm. You find two goalposts and a ball, and you're playing soccer. Basketball, I mean, we go around the world, we find, a milk carton that's connected to a pole and guys are shooting, right? And so right. Basketball, the only other thing they need is shoes. A lot of guys around the world just don't have shoes because their feet are too big, and you just don't find size 17. Right. I look right now in my living room, and I have 32 pairs of size 17 to 20. And we have a project where we go and give shoes back to 3 or 4 countries in West Africa because they're, you got 8th graders and 9th graders who have to play basketball in sandals because they don't have the right equipment, right? But I would say the sport of baseball and football and lacrosse, all these sports, they require a lot of equipment.
Right.
So, basketball and soccer, it's played around the world. And so that's why basketball has just exploded the last 15 years.
Have you seen changes now with the name, image, and likeness piece? How much has that changed the prep basketball scene? Because I know it's radically changed collegiate sports.
Yeah, it has, because everyone thinks they have a value, right? And that value is set by their uncle, their guardian, their AAU coach, or whatever. I'm worth this, right? Whatever that means. Right. Well, there's 2 different things. There's roster value, like what is your value on a roster? Say at the University of Kentucky, like what's your roster value? And then actually, what is your name, image, likeness value based upon, your social media, your content, things that can be, quantified into real dollars, right? Brian, if you have 200,000 Instagram followers, there is value to you promoting a product, right? If I have 100 Instagram followers, I don't have the value. So I think a lot of people get confused with that. And the other thing is, in high school now, everyone thinks that they deserve some type of income. And where does that income come from? I don't know. But good players have representation, which is a good thing. And right. Having representation used to be taboo in the United States. But overseas, guys at 12, 13, 14, they just viewed the representation as, kind of a law firm, an advisor, guiding, and it's really healthy. There's nothing wrong. But those kids overseas, there wasn't school and sports mixed. It's separate. You're in a basketball academy. So you have an agent kind of structuring your deal with the junior team. And then if you make the top EuroLeague team, so you need an agent. In the US, school and sports are mixed. And so there weren't really agents. But the last 3 or 4 years, most high school players that have, a potential to potentially play at the next level or even the professional have some form of representation. And that's a good thing. But in the United States, we still got to break down these barriers, right? The kind of like no shot clock and what's prep and high school and all these different barriers, because there's a lot of different avenues in which to exist in basketball.
Hey, you mentioned the African big men. Yeah. Is there a part of the world that you're starting to see over these last 11 years? I don't want to say catching up to the United States, because I think that's a weird way to say it in basketball, but is there a country or a region that is really elevating and improving at a dramatic rate?
Yeah. So it's a simple answer, but it's also complicated, right? So you have this continent of 52 countries in Africa, and there are 52 countries with 52 different type of resources and federation structures and how do they access and all these different things. And there's all this talent in that continent. And so what's happened the last 15, 20 years, since Europe is so close to Africa in terms of distance, at the northern tip of the continent is just, you're right across from Spain. So what's happened the last 10 or 15 years, a lot of Africans have been quote unquote shipped to European factories, right? The clubs in Spain and the clubs in Greece and France. And so slowly but surely you're seeing like the French national team, right? Where you had 4 French players drafted in the first round this past year.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
and you're seeing like the gold medal game between France and US are like a 3 to 4 possession game. And so I would say, to answer your question, the continent of Africa has so much talent. And recently that talent has gone to Europe to get developed in some capacity. At the same time, slowly but surely matriculated to the US also directly from Africa. But in order to get to the US, there's different things. There's immigration, right? There's student visas. Right. There's, academics, and you got to be able to get in private schools. And depending on who's in the White House, there's policies. Sorry about that. There are policies that potentially limit or allow for more interviews, right? Allow for people to be able to get into the country. And so what we've noticed is, directly in our program, we've had so many talented African kids. And a lot of them come from a couple different things. French-speaking African countries, their schooling systems are outstanding. Because when France colonized some of the countries, when France colonized some of these countries, the one thing they did leave was really, really good schooling systems. So it was easier transition for kids with really good school system backgrounds to be able to come to the U.S. There's a few former British colonies like Sierra Leone and et cetera. Nigeria is a country that's 300 million people, but they speak English as a first language. And so over the last 50 years, Nigerians have come to the United States to study, but they have so much talent that, slowly but surely, the Nigerians are popping up both both high school and college, just because they have, 400 million people around the country. And one of our last players drafted in the NBA at Dembona, he was Nigerian, but his travel was, he went from Nigeria to Turkey in Europe. And he was there for 18 months with the club, trained. And he had 2 choices: go play professionally in Europe, which he almost did, or come to high school for us and then go to his dream. And he was Nigerian. His dream was to go to a really good academic school. Basketball was kind of in his, he used basketball as a vehicle, and he was, he didn't know if he was going to play in the NBA, but he's an elite student, Nigerian, went to UCLA, actually stayed at UCLA because he'd rather loved school, loved the campus down there, and stayed an extra year before going. So, but the continent of Africa, the region of West Africa, the last, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, you're talking about countries like, Guinea, Mali, Senegal, countries where you have a love for the sport. The law countries, the Nigerias, et cetera, they've always been pretty good, but that's been a population. And right. I think, with more kids coming to the U.S. earlier, right, they then have a chance to develop and then prepare themselves prior to going to college, as opposed to going straight from their country to college, which the transition is harder, really, really challenging.
Who do you guys, going back to the prolific prep specifically, who do you compete against? Because I mean, if you're associated with the California high school system, but you have some elite players, I mean, is it a national? I mean, do you travel a lot, or is it just in California?
Yeah, we travel more than any college team. So we're going to be on an airplane 19 times this year. For example, on Thursday, we're getting ready to fly to Toronto. And so there's 2 major leagues and we're going to Jamaica this year. We're going to Hawaii. We can't play any California high school team in the state association because we're not members of the state association. We choose not to be members because we don't want to be restricted in who we can play. And so over the last 15 years, more academies have shown up. And so you're either in a state association and playing state association teams, or you're playing national programs, and there's probably about 75 of them, of which 25 are probably the cream of the cream, right? And so there's 2 leagues currently, as of today, in the system for where you would consider prep basketball for high school. Okay. There's the Grind Session League, which we're members of, and there's 12 teams in their top division. And that's called the Power Conference, and teams like Dream City Christian, who are fantastic, and Utah Prep and some other teams. And then you have the Nike EYBL Scholastic League, which used to be called the NIBC. And so now shoe companies are involved, right? Nike is involved very heavily so during the winter. And Nike has said, hey, we want our kids to play basketball in the spring and summer on our circuit. And during the winter, we want them to play on our circuit also. And so they created 2 years ago a high school league, which is academies that are sponsored by Nike. And so different academies are sponsored by, we're sponsored by Adidas. We're the flagship program for Adidas. And the option to play teams is we got to get on an airplane and we got to go to these national tournaments and play these teams at neutral sites where you have events that host these major matchups. Our league actually hosts 18 weekends of games in different cities. This past week was Denver, Colorado. We didn't play. We don't play every weekend. We play probably 11 of the 18, and we fly into a city and play. So like just this month alone, Prolific Prep, we're getting on an airplane on Thursday, flying to Toronto, playing 2 games, coming back, flying to Miami, playing 2 games, going up the coast in Miami. We're going to play at Florida Atlantic University against Columbus High School, currently the #1 high school team in the country. We come back, fly to Utah, come back, we fly to Vegas, then we fly to Kentucky, then we're flying. So it's challenging because it's more than a college program. And, we have to remember that they're high school student athletes. And so our school principal from Zimbabwe, Justine Leone at Napa Christian, she's fantastic. And she has kind of geared the academic schedule that Monday through Wednesday is intensive. They're long days. Thursday's kind of a half day. Our school's Seventh-day Adventist, so Friday there's not really any school. So Thursday afternoon, we get on an airplane, we come back Sunday, we're ready for school Monday. And it's not easy. You got to find your rest. You got to find a way to develop your body, et cetera. So it's not an easy deal.
But at the same time, you're preparing them. They're going to be a lot better adapted for a NBA career or in the college ranks because they're understanding how to manage time. They're understanding how to recover. They're understanding just the mental aspects of travel. I mean, it's tough. I mean, if you're not used to that, your first year, you're lost in college because of the fact that, hey, you're getting on a plane, you're leaving on this date, your schedules aren't consistent per se. Yeah. And it's disruptive. And if you don't know how to overcome that, man, you struggle. And that's a real thing.
Yeah, it's very challenging. Time management. We have our head coach, Ryan Bernardi, is fantastic. And we have 14 coaches underneath him. And so, they pour their energy into the players, but our players' days are structured. It's rigid. I mean, they got film, they got study hall. It's basically like college, but it's in Napa. It's in a quiet, safe city nestled in the valley between Sacramento and San Francisco. And, we have Mac laptops. They're watching film on the computer, with our huddle and sports coach system, just like the NBA teams do. And so guys are, watching film, developing, doing study halls on the road. We have kids all over the map in terms of going to different academic schools in college. I mean, I have a kid from Guinea at Brown University in the Ivy League, and he was here 4 years and had 72 semester A's and never had a semester B. So, and those guys stimulate others, right? And he's using basketball to advance his academic life. And so, but yeah, it's tiring, it's rigid. Just most of our guys want to play in college, and some of them want to play beyond that. And so they're just finding an environment that stimulates them, and everybody gets stimulated different ways.
I'm going to have to make sure my wife doesn't listen to this too much because, she's going to be like, well, hold on, there's sports up in Napa. Why can't we move to Napa and just kind of stay in wine country all the time?
Oh, true. Yeah, you'll be our guest. You can stay at the Meritage Resort and Spa. Joe, the GM has been a fantastic, awesome. Partner, and Jay is sales director, is a basketball guy, and the Meritage is a 5-star resort. Come and stay anytime you want. It's on us. We're good.
Man, that's awesome. Wait, how can somebody kind of wrapping things up? How can somebody find out more about Prolific Prep?
Yeah, very good point. Our website, prolificprep.org, has a lot of information. We also have a website for our alumni and because we have guys in the NBA and college. And so we have another website. It's prolificprepnews.com. We're very, very good on social media. One of the things that just this year, right now, we are basically every Sunday an episode of a TV show that we created last year for last year's season, which was done in-house by Brian Amarick and Jeremy Rosati. It's on Ball is Life. So if you go to the YouTube channel for Ball is Life and like type in Prolific Prep, you're going to see 6 episodes, which we're on episode 5 now. And next Sunday will be the final episode 6. And they're like 18-minute documentary, like recaps of 3 or 4 weekends with our guys. And it's behind the scenes and it's really cool. It's not as in-depth as a TV show we had in 2019, 2020, which was on Overtime through their YouTube channel. And that was sponsored by Body Armor, where there was 18 episodes. But, right now, every Sunday, go on YouTube, go to the Ball is Life YouTube channel, and you can see kind of a week or 2 week in the life. There's 7 episodes. I think we're on episode 5 now. Our social medias are very good. Prolific Prep Crew on Instagram has, daily updates, and we're very, very good with social media. Our team is very talented this year, as it has been in past. We're on Twitter at Prolific Prep, at Prolific Prep. So we're very social media conscious. Our guys have etiquette and understand, because there's cameras around all the time, right? We just played our first games this past weekend here in the Napa Valley at St. Helena. And, you have 5, 6, 7, 8 different media outlets there covering, with Darren Peterson, who just committed to the University of Kansas on Friday night, and he's the number 3 player in the country. And so our guys are used to the life with cameras. You have different languages being spoken sometimes, and it's kind of unique, right? You walk in the basketball huddle, guys are speaking French on one side, other guys are speaking Wolof, other guys are speaking English. You have coaches with different backgrounds led by Ryan Bernardi, very organic, and it's just a unique. It's hard to imagine unless you actually can see it. So I'd go on YouTube to the Ball is Life channel, YouTube channel, actually kind of look at a couple episodes that just came out from last year's season, which was called Dream Season. So Brian Amarick and Jeremy Rosati produced that, which is fantastic.
I 100% will put those, make sure we get those bios, those links in the description of this episode. Thanks so much for joining us, man. I'm enthralled. I could probably go on for another 2 or 3 hours asking you questions, but I got to respect time and respect your time. But thank you so much for talking about prep basketball and the understanding, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there. And I think, when you're doing it the right way and you're putting forth, what you guys are doing, the character building, the development piece is such an important piece. So thank you so much for jumping on this episode. Appreciate it a ton.
Yeah, no problem. Have me on next month, and I'll bring some of maybe my former players, guys.
Yeah, that would be that would be fun.
Maybe like a couple of guys on there, a guy in the NBA, a guy in college, American and international, and then it's just
that would be awesome.
Yeah,
I'm gonna hold you to that one.
Yeah, we're available all the time. Our guys are available. We have kids from around the world, and the basketball world is one where it's very small, and most people kind of follow certain guys, but it's the other kids, the guys that have the stories, the Eve Missy's, the Adem Bonas, the Muhammad Gays, right? What's their story? How did they get to the U.S.? What happened? Where'd they go to college? What are their parents like? And there's all these stories, and their lives have been changed. Not just in our program, other programs around the country have changed. So a lot of good's being done through the vehicle of sports.
Hey, you've been listening to Just a Cup on Believe. We appreciate it. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this episode. And we'll be back to get you another one in another week or so. Have a great one. Be blessed.